Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming, and thanks to everybody online. I'm going to do a short demonstration of 802.11r fast roaming or fast transition. And basically, has anybody here tried doing fast transition in an office environment to test it? No? Okay, well, I have, and it's not that easy because there's a lot of external factors. There's interference. It's a very imprecise test. You could have overlap, you could have underlap, and so the reason why you want to do this type of test in a controlled environment like the octoBox platform is because then you can have repeatable results, and it allows you to analyze the very fine tuning. So what I'm going to talk about specifically is the timing of the fast roam. So you'll hear Tim and Craig talk about roaming, but that's more of in a general sense where you're just moving from one access point to another. This is actually 802.11r fast roaming, where you would want to minimize the roam time to 50 milliseconds or less. A little bit about DB performance. We do software implementations of 802.11r, also K and V. We have been doing CCX, which was a predecessor to 802.11KRV. We've been doing that for years. And we also do a lot of Wi-Fi security software now into the more automotive peer-to-peer type space. Why do we need 802.11r? Well, we see now that there's multiple access points in the home. We see that there's mesh networks. Some people are starting to implement more access points in their home because they need higher bandwidth. And as higher frequencies come out, you have a shorter range. So you almost need to get to one access point in every room at some point in the future. We're also seeing new commercial markets. DSRC, if that comes to fruition, is going to be an important one for fast roaming, obviously, because if you have two cars passing each other on a highway, you don't have a lot of time to roam between the two devices. Trackside access point for uplink to train systems, and of course IoT. No slide deck is complete without the word IoT in it today. So, however, it is difficult to implement, and you'll see that today when we talk about the roaming logic. The problem is the client and the access point both sometimes fight with each other on who roams where. You could have a vendor-specific implementation that doesn't mesh with another vendor-specific implementation, or it has totally different behavior. You can have conflicts with transition management with 802.11v, where the access point wants to roam you to another band, but the station wants to just roam to another channel on the same band. What happens? Do you actually do a fast roam to another band? So there's all these possible issues that can come up. And because of that, you need to be able to test for every issue. And again, using a octoBox system is one of the best ways to run these types of tests. There is no industry standard performance plan available. There's a protocol test available from the Wi-Fi Alliance. But for real performance, unlike CCX, there isn't really a specific test plan available. So as I mentioned, you do need to do proper testing. If you're developing a chipset or if you're developing an entire system, you want to make sure that it will work nicely with the access points, or if you're an access point vendor, it works nicely with all the clients available. So what we found with the octoBox is that it provides an RF interface with proper MIMO real-life testing. So it's a real black box test. You can just take your device, which we've done, is just stick it in there and test it using the high gain antennas as an air coupling interface. So this is our test setup today. Like I said, it's in the 3 boxes that you see in the back of the room. So for those of you not in the studio audience, the people at home viewing, there is a large stack of anechoic chambers, and we've got 2 Cisco 1602 access points, 1 in each chamber, and then we've got an Apple iPad mini in one of the chambers, which is the station under test. That's what we're going to use for testing the fast roaming. We've got the Cisco access points connected to a 2504 wireless LAN controller, which provides the power over Ethernet, the DHCP, and also radius. So it's a very nice self-contained system. And then for the packet capture, we're using the PALs in a packet capture mode in this case. So we're using 2 PALs, one to capture each channel. So AP1 will be on channel 36, AP2 will be on channel 48, and each PAL will capture those channels, and then using Synchro Sniffer, we'll actually merge the two together into a single packet capture file, and then that'll allow us to see the roam time very easily and quickly. And to perform the roam, we use two quad 10 attenuators. So we programmed them to increase attenuation of one of them by 2 dBs per second and decrease attenuation on the other one by 2 dBs per second. So starting with AP1, you would have no attenuation on AP1 so that the iPad associates to AP1, with 40 dB on AB2, and then one slowly ramps up, the other one slowly ramps down. 2 dBs per second is approximately the rate at which the signal will decrease when you walk away at walking speed from an access point in an office. So what we're trying to simulate is if you have two access points at two opposite ends of your office, and you walk from one end to the other. So this is just recapping what I just said. We configure the AP1 with no attenuation, AP2 with 40, and then we just, using a script, we program the programmable attenuators to slowly change their attenuation rates, or values. The rate is always 2 dB per second. We are using PEEP MSCHAP v2 authentication, and that's just to verify that we are actually doing a fast transition and that we're not re-authenticating when we move from the first access point to the second one. And the way we're measuring the roam is we're sending multicast packets from the iPad. So I have an app running on the iPad right now that's sending out multicast packets every 10 milliseconds. So that gives us about 10 milliseconds resolution on the roam. And then we will start the packet capture on the two PALs and then run the attenuators. And then after about 30 seconds, we should be able to see a file. So that's basically it. Again, using Synchro Sniffer, we merge the capture files, look at Wireshark, and we just look for the reassociation request. And from the reassociation request to the first data packet sent on the second AP that we roam to, that is considered the roam time. So that's what it'll look like. The guys at octoScope have written a handy test script to actually initialize the attenuators, run and turn on the packet capture on the PALs, and do the packet capture, do the Synchro Sniffer and everything. So I just thought I'd mention that I actually haven't used the octoBox until yesterday. So as a testament to how fast you can get and understand the system, we went from like 0 to actually doing a roam test in less than a day. So that's, of course, with the help of the staff here. But again, it's not difficult to learn once you have some help, and it only takes a day. So this is the script that runs. So we're currently setting up the sniffers and resetting the attenuators. And it didn't trigger the car alarm, I hope, yeah. For those at home, some car just went off an alarm. So right now you can see on the screen the first attenuator is increasing, the second one is decreasing. So it's roaming from AP1 to AP2. And again, we use 40 dB as a starting point on AP1 or AP2. And so at some point in that roam, it should have gone to AP2. Now we merge the files and we open Wireshark and we take a look. Okay, so there's the reassociation request. Now I'm just going to go find it in the context of the file. How many people have used Wireshark before? Okay, oh good. So at least some of you know what I'm doing here. That's good. Okay, so the reassociation request is highlighted on the bottom. If you look up a few points, you'll see the last data packet. It's about the sixth one up. Oh, I can do this, yeah. So that's the last data packet on the first access point. And that was at about 23.45725 seconds. And so the way it works is you get the authentication so the iPad sends the data and then decides it needs to roam because the signal strength has gotten below a certain threshold. So it authenticates with the second AP, and then the AP responds back right there. And then, of course, if that all goes well, which it did, the reassociation request from the iPad to the second AP that it wants to roam to. And then there's a reassociation response. Very short time later, like less than 10 milliseconds later. And then there's some action frames for things like getting the neighbor report. So that's an action frame from the iPad to the access point, asking for a list of available channels. And then the iPad, or sorry, the Cisco access point responds back with the list of channels. And then there should be some data. And so there's the data at 23.48. So the difference between 23.48 and 23.46 is approximately 20 milliseconds. So this roamed in 20 milliseconds. So if you're doing streaming media in the office or in your home, you're not going to notice anything. You're not going to notice anything on a voice over IP call. So when properly implemented, it works really well. But you need to run the test to know that it's actually properly implemented.
Just for the record, and we do a lot of testing as a company, and we have not seen a fast roam ever. And when Dennis told me he can do it, I said, come on over, let's join the show. And I still didn't believe it. And I didn't announce him until the last minute because I had to see that fast roam for myself, and it actually worked. But another, just a quick one, we have this new field,
yes.
Strobe Id, and so you may have noticed, those of you who pay attention, that there were 2 probes involved to sniff the handover.
That's a good point. So you can see appended to the end of the probe ID, it says AP2. So that's the capture on the AP2 channel. And if I go up here, you'll see that there's stuff from AP1 before the roam. So you can quickly see where the roam actually occurs. And that just shows that the 2 merged packet capture files are now in one place where you can easily see the roam on one time base. You're not having to perform offsets or anything like that. So it's really, it makes automated testing so much easier. It makes even just casual testing like what we just did now so much easier. It's a much easier way to do roaming, and hopefully will promote better 802.11r implementations. So the question was, why is the roam time not from the last AP that got an ACK to the first AP that got an ACK? It's because basically the decision point for the access point is the reassociation request. So it can send data up to that point. So even after the authentication request, it can send, but after the reassociation request, it's more or less committed to moving to the other access point. So we've determined that that is the window of time between the reassociation request and the first data on the second access point, that no data can be transmitted. And so that's what we consider to be the roam time. Now, you could use your definition if you're, say, testing just at the chipset level, right? But it depends on how far you want to go, because you can go data to data. You could even measure the data on from the access point on the wireline interface and say, oh, okay, we saw data on the access point using EtherReal or something, but now you're testing the access point. So in our case, we're usually testing the device, an OEM device, and so this is kind of the scope of what we want to do. We want to test the OS plus the chipset together, and not the access point necessarily, if that makes any sense. But that is one of the valid ways you can test it, if you want to get pure roaming performance, yes. So the question was, the synchro sniffer merges the 2 files together? Right, so we had 2 PCAP files. One was on channel 36 and one was on channel 48, and it just merged it. But I think you can maybe speak to that better.
I need to stand right in front of this thing, but I think the other thing that the synchro sniffer includes is the synchronization, actually. So you can take 2 PCAP files, but if the time bases are off on the captures, then you have to either manually figure out what's going on, or you just kind of have a mess. So it includes the initial synchronization of the devices themselves. I mentioned NTP and PTP that are included.
Yeah, I would just add that I think you're asking, what if it's exactly the same timestamp? We will list them because just like we list, you see the Probe ID, AP1 and AP2, they change, and that you may have identical timestamp, and which order they'll be listed, I don't know, but you can capture them, and they'll probably be at different RSSI levels.
So the first question from Victoria, what is the DTIM set for this test? That is a good question. I just used the Cisco default. So I guess the answer would be look up what the 1602 AP in lightweight mode uses as a default DTIM, and that's what I'm using. The second question is from Gajab is if you disable FBT on the APs, how much longer would the roam take? FBT. What would that be? I guess it'd be FT, yeah. Yeah, okay. The roam would take about 500 milliseconds, we found, when there's no fast transition. In this case, because it's a full 802.1x reauthentication, so it has to contact this Radius server, exchange certificates, do all this stuff. That's about 500 milliseconds. If it was pre-shared key, it would be a lot less, but it would still be more. And this is actually an interesting point. A lot of people ask us, why bother with 802.11r in your home with a pre-shared key network, right? Because pre-shared key is pretty fast. And the difference is that we found is that 802.11r kind of forces the vendor to be better at roaming because they start using 802.11k neighbor reports and beacon reports. And so they're not just relying on the client device driver just performing like a sticky client or waiting until the signal is completely gone before it tries scanning and reassociating to another device. And we actually have seen a slight time improvement on the roam itself between that and PSK. So in our case, we're seeing 20 milliseconds. In a four-way handshake, it'll be more like 50 milliseconds, 50, 60 milliseconds. So there is a slight improvement, but the big one is that it just manages roaming more elegantly than a non-802.11r client.